What was your "why are you booing me? I'm right" moment? In kindergarten I drew a picture of grapes and colored them green, and the other kids and the teacher was saying there are no green grapes, only purple. I had the same problem in kindergarten, but I colored an apple green and was told apples were red. I was a polite kid, so I was just all no, they can be green too every time the teacher tried to tell me they were red. My grandma had an apple tree that grew green apples. She used them in pies. I'd eaten those pies every single Thanksgiving and Christmas. When she picked apples, I was given them as an afternoon snack. In my kid mind, wasn't a matter of am I wrong, are those not apples? It was more of a this teacher doesn't even know about grandma's apple tree. The 5 boroughs of New York City are also counties. In 2nd grade I joined the robotics club. One day we were learning about how an animal's bones affect the way animals move, and the teacher asked, "Give me examples about animals with spines." I said snakes. She said snakes are like worms and lack spines. The whole thing is a spine. It's a spine with a head. Me saying that Germany has a coastline, and everyone in class, including my teacher, disagreeing. Still remember it over 12 years later. I had basically the same thing happen when everyone else in my class insisted that Africa wasn't attached to any other land and was actually a giant island. My response was, then why did they need to build the Suez Canal? That seemed to stump them. I used to be a hockey ref, so all the time. Grade 7 Canada. We were learning about medieval Japan in social studies class, basically history class. I made a comment that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. A kid said it was the Germans and some people backed him up. Teacher said she forgot who bombed Pearl Harbor, but it wasn't the Japanese. If only smartphones existed back then. I was working on a team of people building a race car. I told them a part that was technically strong enough should be built heavier to handle shock loads from bad track conditions. I got told I was a moron and it would be fine. Someone else ran the numbers and it would be fine. So I built the parts, put them on the car, and lo and behold, it broke and the car ended up on its roof. You'd think that would be validation of my opinion, and people would agree that I was right. Not how it happened. I was the asshole because I built them, so it was my fault. I've had many booed moments, but this is a more recent one. In my science class we were watching a few documentaries about the US space program, and the topic of pollution came up with fuel consumption, and in the midst someone asked about where the parts of the rocket go once they are abandoned by the spacecraft. I commented how it just falls, and NASA pretty much just hoped that it didn't fall on people. One of the reasons they launch out of Florida or a Cape is so the parts end up in the water and not hitting civilization. But nobody believed me, since it would be then that NASA is polluting the ocean. Absolutely true. And part of why what SpaceX has been doing with reusable self-landing rockets is so important and exciting. Lot cheaper to go into space if you're not throwing away the most very expensive part after one use. An old coworker tried telling me that all rectangles are squares, but not all squares are rectangles. I then tried explaining that it was the opposite and proceeded to get called stupid by the rest of the staff for about 20 minutes. A professor in undergrad asked what the orbit speed of the space shuttle is. I volunteered 18,000 mph, it's 17.5 kmph, and he laughed and said absolutely not, and compared it to the speed of an airliner, approximately 500 mph. Idiot. Was working for a political org during an election year. Got a file from another office and they wanted me to run my standard scripts to get them a final direct mail address file. Asked the other office if they wanted me to correct any of the addresses, and they told me to absolutely not change any of the data because it was good. Told them that I really felt like the data needed to be checked, and was told by their office, their management and my management that I should just do as I'm told. In the end, apartment building offices throughout the state received several hundreds of pieces of direct mail from the org. I knew the file didn't have apartment numbers listed for anybody, but I wasn't allowed to change it. A teacher in biology GCSE was discussing a food pyramid of a river habitat, and she claimed that 10 spray were at the top of the food chain. I pointed out, "Miss, I think that says 1 osprey." She snarled and said, "Fine, everyone. Anon thinks he knows better than me. So now it's 1 spray." The whole class groaned and were muttering as they had to cross out what they'd written and rewrite it. And people on my table were giving me evils and telling me to be quiet. Utterly ridiculous that I even passed that subject. 8th grade. Science class. Teacher was trying to be tricky or some shit, I guess. Gave us a word problem that was something like, if you dig a hole 3 by 3 by 4 in the ground, how much dirt is in the hole? I raised my hand and said nothing. There was no dirt in the hole. Her specific question was how much dirt was in the hole, not how big the hole was or what was left. I gave the right answer. There was no dirt in the hole. She told me I was wrong. I pondered her answer, decided it didn't make sense. Then raised my hand again. I was a studious nerd back then. I actually wanted to impress the teacher. I gave the same answer and my reasoning. She said how much dirt. No, she told me. I was wrong and stopped putting my hand up. The answer, air. There was air in the hole. Air. I'm still pissed. It's 30 years later but I've still not forgiven her for embarrassing me and being wrong. 4th grade. We had our first laboratory class and we were learning about the lab instruments and basic safety. We were divided in around 4 tables with 6 students each. And each table had a flask with colored water in it. The teacher told us to by turns each one grab the flask and pretend to mix the liquid by spinning it. The first kid in my table grabs the flask but in a way that his hand covers the flask's mouth. I tell him Sachin that he should grab it by the neck sides instead of the mouth because if it was acid it could splash to his palm and hurt him. The other kids at my table started calling me a crybaby saying that it obviously isn't acid and that it was only colored water like the one they use in my juice. And they all proceed to hold and mix it improperly. Eventually the teacher teaches us the correct way to hold flasks and mix them after seeing everyone grab them incorrectly. He tells us to grab them by the neck sides just like I said and to not cover the mouth with our hands because if it was real acid we could get seriously hurt just like I said. I still get a bit salty when remembering that. Not myself. But my brother had a high-point question on a test in 8th grade about the eventual fate of our sun, a question that he happened to know the correct answer to because he had been watching the cosmos with my dad and they had explicitly talked about the sun's life and death during the episode, writing in detail about how it will swell up to a red giant, likely gobble up the earth, eventually shrink down to a white dwarf. He confidently wrote down the answer and his teacher marked it wrong, and the question was worth enough points it knocked him down a letter grade. Why? Well, when he went to talk to her, wanting to find out why he got it wrong and possibly see if he could at least get some points, it was because the science book, of all things, had the information all wrong and she graded completely off the science book. Even after arguing with her, she wouldn't hear it. The grade was the grade. For some reason the science book in question outlined a situation that didn't make any sense with our as of 2012 information. I'm not sure if it was just because the science book was out of date, or it was just filled with wrong information, but the second my brother realized it was in the book it absolutely incensed him. I wish I could tell you exactly what it got wrong, but it's been 7 years at this point so the memory of him retelling me is fuzzy. I want to say it skipped the red giant phase of the sun, but it's been years. Anyone who gets knocked down a whole letter grade for a right answer would be pissed. There's a happy ending to this story though. They had an assignment where they had an essay of their choice. So long as it was pertaining to what they learned might have been extra credit. Again, details are fuzzy, and petty asshole my brother can be. He wrote his essay wholly on why he was right and the book was wrong, citing the astrophysicists in the cosmos and Stephen Hawking, among other renowned studies and scientists. After that, the teacher went and finally reversed the grade. My class didn't believe me, teacher included, but he admitted later that he was wrong when I said that a third 1/3 of the English language come from Normandic French. Another time when I said that the wireless communication protocol's name, Bluetooth, come from a king of Denmark that was called Bluetooth. Them, I was right all along. When I was in 1st grade, I said that electricity can be gained via water hydropower. Everyone started laughing at me until my teacher said, "He is right." The whole class went silent. My daughter had a teacher in 3rd grade that told her that Swedish pancakes were really just crepes. She had no idea what to do since her teacher told her something that she eats all the time wasn't what her parents told her it was. Her next project about a week later was about other cultures, so I had her do a report on Sweden. Guess what was included in that report, and guess what she brought to class to share with everyone during her report out to class? Teacher said nothing but did give her an A. I was once in a chorus in my community college and they had interesting social dynamics. It was primarily older white women, who were the alphas of the group. So we were doing a Latin American carol called Vamos Pastacitos and there was debate between them about the pronunciation of the C. I said the soft C is pronounced like an S. An old lady in the group said it was pronounced like the CH in cheese. I said you're thinking of Italian. In Spanish it's pronounced as an S, or in many European Spanish dialects like a TH. The choral conductor went with her churchy old lady friend and they all pronounced it like Vamos Pastacitos. It still haunts me to this day. I got downvoted like crazy for saying that a nurse told me that cold water and soap kills germs just as well as hot water when washing your hands. Linked some sources and everything. Then people started calling me a troll. My understanding is that in order for the temperature of the water to help kill germs, it would have to be hot enough to give severe skin burns. Me, in science class at middle school, saying that water expands when it's heated up, and everyone including my science teacher saying I was wrong and that water only expands when it freezes and becomes ice. Water has its maximum density at 4 degrees. It expands both cooling and heating from that point. Once in middle school, the teacher said that carnivore dinosaurs like the T-Rex appeared in the Jurassic era. Then I said that the T-Rex was actually from the Cretaceous period. The teacher and some students said that I was wrong because it's called Jurassic Park and shit. On the next day, I brought some sources from the internet that agreed with me and the teacher corrected herself after doing some quick search on her own, but that didn't stop me from getting nicknamed Dinosaur in class. I forgot Pluto on my list of planets in 3rd grade. Got a B+ instead of an A. Should have gotten extra credit. Who's laughing now? When I was in 8th grade I made the apparently controversial statement that the number 2 is 2/3 of the number 3. I had 5 people try and convince me otherwise by doing long division on the board and saying, "See, it's not 2/3. It's 0.66 repeating." Bunch of mouth breathers. In 5th grade we have a problem on math class with mirroring images. It asked if you were driving in a car and look in the rear view mirror, how would you see the ambulance emblem if an ambulance car was driving behind you? I said you would see ambulance because at least in my country those signs are intentionally put on mirrored, so you can see it normally in a mirror. Everyone said I was stupid, even the teacher. I still remember it after 8 years. That concentration camps and extermination camps weren't the same thing under the Nazis. Americans liberated concentration camps but never an extermination camp, as extermination camps were all in the East. I guess that really pissed off a lot of people when I said it. I've worked in technical support for over 20 years. It happens to me on a weekly basis. Usually it's the network admins trying to prove me wrong. They're the biggest divas in the IT industry. Yes, your precious network is misconfigured. No, I don't care how many certifications you have. When I suggested in high school that the science fair should be voluntary and not mandatory, since 90% of the people in the class do their projects at the last minute with their parents doing almost all of it, the teachers and my classmates told me I was wrong and how valuable the science fair was. Lo and behold, the day the projects were due, literally everyone was complaining as to why it was mandatory, since they did their projects at the last minute with their parents doing all of the work. I loved maps. And the first time I spotted Iceland, my classmates disagreed when I called it Iceland, and they say that it's called Iceland. They dismissed me and wouldn't even look. Still remember it to this day. I believe they thought you were instead talking about an island, and they probably thought you just mispronounced that instead of Iceland. The question in history class was who sacked Rome, and I raised my hand and answered the Visigoths. Everyone laughed along the lines of "That's a ridiculous name, there's no such thing as the Visigoths, and that the Vandals sacked Rome," which is where we get the word vandalism from. While yes, the Vandals did sack Rome, so did the Visigoths in the year 410. I recently decided to retire from a somewhat dangerous profession in order to better look after my mental health, but a lot of people didn't like it and thought I owed it to them to keep working. When my grandmother fell over last month, she was told at her age, having her hip broken this bad would require surgery. We were all in the room. My mother said she can't have surgery. She'll die. I instantly say better off early than stretching it out. Grandma laughed. Nobody else did. My friend thinks that the Voyage 1 is outside our galaxy just because it's in interstellar space. He thinks that means outside the galaxy. Even after I showed him on Google, he still says he's right and got his friends to try to intimidate me all because he thinks he knows everything about space.